Hi, this is the World Storytelling Cafe, possibly the World Poetry Cafe, because I've got some stories and some poems for you. This is the family tent, and this is going to be a themed half an hour, because for the next half an hour I'm going to be reading you and telling you some very scary stories, reading you some very scary poems. So it's a scary half an hour. Now it's for children, I guess, for families, but you need to be age 7 and above, I would say, really. You need to be not on your own. And you need to be not easily scared. My name is Roger Stevens, and here we go. So the first poem, I'm going to read you a couple of poems to start. And I wrote this poem. I mainly write poems. I write stories as well. And I always carry a notebook with me, because you never know when something's going to happen and you need to write it down in your notebook. You hear things all the time. Things that could become stories, could become poems. And I take my notebook to bed with me. And one night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I heard these sounds outside. Now, has that ever happened to you? You wake up in the night and there are sounds. There's something going on, maybe in the house, maybe in the garden, maybe just outside of the window. And that happened to me. And luckily I had my notebook there. So I jotted things down in my notebook. And then in the morning when I woke up, I looked at what I'd written. I could just about remember. I remembered feeling very scared. And I wrote this poem. And it's called The Ghostly Visitor. I woke up last night in a pool of blue moonlight. The curtains were swaying, but there was no wind. The night was still and silent, silent, except for the clock, ticking the minutes past midnight, and the sound in the garden, the sound of bones clicking, the sound of a body dragging itself over the autumn leaves, over the lawn, the sound of a rasping breath, far away, but growing louder, getting closer, the rustle of branch against the wall, or a claw scrabbling, beneath my window, climbing, trying to gain a purchase on the brick. I was frozen in my bed, too scared to get up and turn on the light. I lay for an hour listening, until the sound gradually receded, leaving my window, leaving my garden, clearly heading in the direction of your house. Your house. This poem is called Ghost School, and I had the idea of sort of reversing the idea of a haunted school. So instead of having children scared of a ghost, I wondered what it might be like to be the ghost. What would it be like from the ghost's point of view? The school building looks like any other school building, like your school building, I expect. A little out of focus maybe, a bit blurry round the edges. But the children seem vague, slightly out of focus. They flicker, as though they are on a TV with poor reception. Sure, the children chatter and shriek like any children do, but their voices sound distant, as though the volume control had been turned down, as though the treble control have been turned up. How I came to be here in this strange school, I've no idea. As I walk along the corridor, I can hear the children laughing in the classroom. I can hear the teacher joking. But when I go in, everyone falls silent. They stare at me and run from the classroom, screaming. Why are they so scared of me? I haven't done anything. And this is a sort of silly poem, really. It's when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're thirsty and you haven't got a drink by your bed and you have to go down to the kitchen and it's dark and everywhere you look, everything looks that little bit scarier than it does in the day, doesn't it? The wardrobe looks scarier. The day, everything looks a little bit scarier. And this is called Visiting the Kitchen at Midnight for a Glass of Milk. First, tiptoe past the wardrobe monster on the landing outside your bedroom, past its massive, mysterious wooden jaws, open and waiting. Its stale shirt, old sock, damp, decaying smell. Its teeth gently clinking and clanking, anticipating. Then creep downstairs, where the table monster sleeps. Its thick hide of yellow-flowered plastic will slip and slither as it shuffles towards you, crawls over you, weighs you down and suffocates you. Don't wake it. Finally, the kitchen. Do not disturb the chair monster, quick, agile, with its hard wooden back and awkward jabbing arms, thin brown legs that move so fast, stabbing, poking, trying to bring you down. At last, you make it to the fridge. You open the door, breathe a sigh of relief, reach for the milk. A soft metallic voice says, "Hello, I've been expecting you." And icy arms drag you in, and the door closes, and the little light goes out. Yes. So, I've got two stories for you. They're both true stories. And the first happened to me when I was a child. I was about 10 years old, and I lived in a place called Seaford. And Seaford is near Brighton, where I live now. And if you go from Seaford along the coast towards Eastbourne, you go up over the cliffs, over the Seven Sisters, over Beachy Head. It's really, really high there. And really, to understand this story, appreciate this story, you need to be English or to have come from England to know about Guy Fawkes Night. And if you don't know about Guy Fawkes Night, in 1605, a long, long time ago, a group of men decided they wanted to blow up the Houses of Parliament. King James was in the Houses of Parliament on that evening, and they smuggled big barrels of gunpowder underneath the Houses of Parliament, and they were going to blow the whole lot up, including King James, whom they didn't think a lot of. And amongst them was a guy called Guy Fawkes, and the plot was foiled, so it didn't happen. And that night, from that night onwards, on November the 5th, every year, all over Britain, people would have big bonfires, and it became known as Bonfire Night or Guy Fawkes Night. And that tradition still goes on today. So if you come to Britain on November the 5th, you will see there are fireworks going off all over the place. And when I was 10 years old, a long time ago, that would have been in 1958, long time ago, we used to buy fireworks from the shops, and we'd all have our own little firework display, and we'd have our own little bonfire in the garden. Nowadays it's much more organised. There are lots of big displays. They're usually on the nearest Saturday to November the 5th. So Bonfire Night. So you need to know that. It's key to this story. When you're writing a story, if you're a writer, if you're an author, a common way to write a story is to begin with something really exciting happening near the beginning of the story. So if you write a story, start with some action, something big happening. Draw your reader straight into the story. Very good way to start a story. And lots of writers start stories like that. Right. Then you can fill in the little bit leading up to that. If you start at the very beginning of a story, it can be a little bit boring. So you want to get into the action. So I'll start my story like that. It was actually on November the 1st, and my best mate and me, Dan, his name was, me and Dan, we built this big bonfire. We built it right up on the cliffs at Seaford, overlooking the sea. November the 1st, we were both up there, and we lit the bonfire. Now this is 5 days early. Now we'd started building the bonfire, just something we were doing between us. But everybody in the town, a lot of our friends, a lot of our mates, adults, all sorts of people saw us building this bonfire up on the cliffs and thought, hey, wow, that's a brilliant thing. We'll help. We've got loads of stuff. We've got old branches, tree trunks, cupboards, stuff. Well, we'll just make this huge bonfire. Be brilliant for Bonfire Night on November the 5th. Fantastic. But me and Dan, November the 1st, there we are, up on the cliffs. We set the bonfire alight 5 days early. And we can see the people in the town have noticed. And they're quite, well, they're cross. They don't know what's going on. Maybe upset, maybe angry. And they're all coming out. They're on their way to find us. And we have set it on fire. Okay. Let me just take you back to the beginning. It began 1 year earlier. I was on my way home. It was on November the 1st. It was getting dark. And it was quite dark, actually. I was coming home from my tea. And it was raining and I was wet. And it was windy. There was a terrible wind. And the sea was really rough. When you looked out from on top of the cliffs, you could see the waves. And then I was looking out to sea and I noticed something. I noticed in the distance a ship. And I thought, oh, it's a rough all night for a ship to be out there on the sea. But the more I looked, I could see that the ship was sort of coming towards me. It was actually approaching the cliffs. It was approaching the rocks. And if it kept going on that course, it was going to crash into the rocks. It was going to sink. I then noticed something really peculiar. It wasn't a modern ship at all. It was an old-fashioned sailing ship. It was one of those ships with the big sails like a clipper or a cutter. I don't know what they're called. It was a big old-fashioned ship. And it was getting closer and closer. And then it hit the rocks. And there was a terrible cracking, creaking, crashing sort of noise. And the ship went down in front of my very eyes. It gradually went, sank. And you could see people diving overboard like this, and it sank beneath the waves. And I was scared. I thought, I've got to do something. Now, in those days, in 1958, we didn't have mobile phones. I know. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? No mobile phones, no. So I ran home fast as I could. And I ran in and I said, Mum, Dad, quick, something terrible's happened. A ship has hit the rocks just off Seaford Head. A ship has hit the rocks. It sank. We've got to call the Coast Guard. Call the Coast Guard. So Mum got on the phone. Hello, is that the Coast Guard? And she told the Coast Guard the story. Now, what I didn't tell Mum is that it was an old-fashioned ship. And I didn't tell her it had a pirate flag. That's right. It had a pirate flag. It was a pirate ship. No, I didn't tell her that because, well, I didn't think she'd believe me. And then she'd think I was making it up, which I wasn't. About half an hour later, there was a knock on the door. It was the Coast Guard. And he was dressed, it was raining really hard by now. He was dressed in a sort of a big raincoat, big yellow raincoat, a big yellow kind of sou'wester on his head. And Mum invited him in. And she said, "Did you find the ship? Was there a lot of wreckage? Did we save anybody? What happened?" And he said, "No," he said, there was no ship sunk. She said, "What?" And she looked at me aghast. She just like, "Why have you told us this? Why is it a lie? Is it a fib? What's going on?" And he said, "No, there was no ship sunk. But thanks for alerting us, because if you see anything at sea, anything odd like that, you should always tell us, just in case." And I felt angry. I felt stupid. I thought, what's going on? And I thought, what are my parents going to say? I think they'll think I made it all up, and I didn't. And the Coast Guard said to me, he said, "Just come with me." And he led me outside, and he said goodbye to Mum and Dad. And he said, "Just come outside." And we stepped out of the house, and he said there was no ship sunk. And I thought he was going to tell me off, right? He said, "No, there was no ship sunk, but a few hundred years ago, there was a ship sunk on November the 1st. He said, "It's well documented. It was a pirate ship." He said, "And since then, there have been many sightings of that ship. It's a ghost ship." Now, you can believe it or not believe it, but people have seen it. They've seen it sinking on November the 1st. That was scary. It was scary. Anyway, Mum and Dad they were very odd, really. I mean, they didn't want to call me, they didn't want to say, "You're just not telling us the truth," and they could see I was upset, and I think they just kind of left it. Maybe they thought I imagined it. I always had, a vivid imagination. Anyway, the next day, I told my best mate, Dan, all about it. And Dan and I went to the library. We didn't have Google then either. You couldn't just look something up on your phone and find out about it. None of that. We had to look in books in the library. And we found out there was indeed a pirate ship that sank on the 1st of November, about 400 years ago. And then I had the bright idea. Then I had the plan. The following year, in the middle of October, I said to Dan, "Do you know what? I think we should build a bonfire up on Seaford Head. And then if that ghost ship appears again, it will see the bonfire, realise it's heading straight for the cliffs, and it will turn, and we will avert the disaster." And Dan said, "That sounds like fun. Yeah, let's do that." And of course, we didn't think that everybody would be joining in, helping us build the bonfire, because we'd forgotten that it was so close to Bonfire Night. So we built this big bonfire with the help of everybody from the town. We'd all built the big bonfire together. And then here was Dan and me setting it on fire. Yeah, Dan and me, the top of the cliffs, in the rain, November the 1st, peering out to sea. And then we saw it. We saw the ship. Sure enough, the ghost ship was coming in towards us. Dan was, I don't know if Dan ever actually believed me that I'd seen the ghost ship, but he could see it too now. So he believed me now. And it was very spooky, very scary. and we lit the bonfire. And the ship gradually came closer, and the flames really got going in the fire, and it burst into flame. The flames are going right up to the sky with the sparks and the smokes. And then we noticed people had noticed it in Seaford, in the town, and they were running to find out who on earth had set fire to their fantastic bonfire. And the ship that was coming towards us gradually turned away. The ship saw the flames, saw the bonfire, realised it was heading for land, and didn't crash into the rocks. And Dan said, what are we going to do? Look, everybody's nearly here. What are we going to do? And I said, well, we just have to tell them that we saw it. Somebody had set it alight too. We can't tell them that we did it. I mean, we should have done, I suppose, but we didn't. A bit naughty. We said, oh, I don't know, somebody found we saw it. Anyway, everybody was a bit cross, but, you know, everyone said, don't worry, we'll build another one. We'll build another one, don't worry, lads, which made us feel bad. Don't worry, lads, it'll be okay, we'll build you another one. Which they did, and we had a fantastic bonfire on November the 5th. And everybody sort of gradually went away, and there was just the embers of the fire, and Dan said, well, I've got to go, I'll see you. And I said, thanks, Dan, that was great. We saved the ship. And there was just me, and the wind was getting up, and it was proper dark, and it was raining. And I just sort of kicked over the last of the embers. And I was about to walk away, I felt a hand on my shoulder. On my shoulder. And I looked around, and there was a figure with a red sort of bandana, white face, big scar down there. He said, thank you. I closed my eyes and I opened them again, not knowing quite what I would say. And there was nobody there. Just me, the dark, and the embers of the fire. That's the story of the pirate ship. Okay, I've got a couple more poems for you, and another little story, another true story. This poem is called Spooks Corner. And when I was at school, and we used to walk home from school, we used to go past this big old deserted house. It had been, nobody had lived there for, well, I couldn't remember anybody ever living there. And all the garden was overgrown with weeds and big like spiky grasses. And all the windows were boarded up. It was a big old house with a bit of land. And we used to have to walk past it on the way home. And I always thought that the boarded up windows were a little bit like, it was like it was wearing sunglasses, because I always imagined it might be haunted and that maybe somebody could just peek out, like you can see through sunglasses, can't you, and people can't see your eyes. And the story was that it was haunted. And a thing grew up, you know, like it does with children. Now, I don't actually believe in ghosts. I really, really don't. I mean, there are lots of weird things that happen, but I don't know. I don't think ghosts exist. But there are some very strange things that do happen, aren't there? And we used to have this thing that when you walked past it, past the house on your way home from school, you must never look back over your shoulder. Never look back to find out if anybody was looking out, following you. Because if you did look back, well, just don't look back. So this is the poem that I wrote. Walking home after school, when the sky has turned black, past the 3 oak trees by the old running track, there's a boarded up house that wears dark glasses. Its garden is smothered with strange spiky grasses. It's the spook, and it peers through a crack. Walk faster, and never look back. the spook lives there, and when you walk past, you must never look back. You must walk very fast, or you'll catch the spook's eye, and he'll follow you home, and he'll creep up on you. And when you're not looking, the spook will say, "Boo!" It's the spook, it's the spook, and it peers through a crack. Walk faster, and never look back. Okay. Time is rushing on. I have a spooky story. Now, when I was, how old was I? In my 20s, I suppose. I was a teacher. And I used to teach in a big old Victorian school. And the school was kind of falling down a bit. And there'd been this really big gales and a big storm in 1987. And the school, part of the school was declared unsafe. And the whole school, it was a year 7 and 8s. It's a sort of a lower school, it was called, of year 7s and 8s. And we all had to move. I taught year 7 and 8. And we all had to move to the big main school. Okay. Now, while I was there, I wrote a story. The story is called The Howen. And it was the first story that I wrote that was published. So it was my first story, The Howen. And you can find it. It's out of print. It's been out of print a long time. But you can find it if you have a look on eBay. You can find a second-hand copy. I was very pleased with it. And it's about two children who are playing in the playground. And the whistle blows. And they're playing a game of catch. Now, they've just hid in the craft design and technology room, which is kind of built on the side of the school. So it's a sort of a newer building, sort of built onto the school, attached onto the school, but it's separate from the school. And that's where I worked as a teacher. But in the story, the two children run and hide in the craft design and technology room. And when the whistle goes, they realise they can't actually come out of the room. If they come out of the craft design technology building, they're going to be seen by the teachers. So they think, because they're not allowed in there, you see. You're not allowed in there without a teacher because of all the dangerous equipment and saws and bandsaws and all sorts of things. So they think, don't worry, we'll creep out when everybody's gone in. So the whistle's gone, all the children lined up in the playground, the two heroes of the story are waiting. And then they see the head teachers coming towards them and think, oh no, we'll be in terrible trouble, we shouldn't be here. So they go into the storeroom, which is at the back of the craft design and technology room. And the head teacher comes in. And he's a bit cross because the room shouldn't have been unlocked. The building should be locked. The teacher's not there because there's lots of dangerous equipment in it. And he walks through to the back room, to the storeroom, where all the wood and all sorts of stuff is stored. And the children are really frightened now because if the head finds them there, they are in big, mega trouble. However, he tries the door, he sees that it's open, he has a little grumble, he locks the door, walks out, locks the main door to the main building. Two children are now trapped. They notice there's a ladder and they notice there's a trap door in the building. So they put the ladder against the trap door, they climb out, they go through into the attic, into the loft of the building. They discover that they are in an alternate universe. They're in a place inhabited by these giant dog-like creatures called the Howen. And the story, it's called The Howen, and it's about these two children and their adventures in this sort of other reality. A bit like Narnia, going through the wardrobe, or Alice in Wonderland, going down the rabbit hole. Well, that's my story. But I actually was a teacher at that school. So I set the story in the school that I taught at. And I was the craft design technology teacher, and that was my room. I had this room with all the equipment and everything in. And this is how I got the idea for that story. and this is the true bit. That was just my imagination. But this is what really happened. I was in there one day with a class and we were making some cranes, okay, which are quite fun things to do because you've got the little crane bit going up and down and you've got a little pulley and a thing with a hook and all that. So we were making some cranes and there was a dog barking. And we immediately thought, the dog barking, there's a dog got into the playground. Now, you will know that. If a dog's ever come into your playground at school, chaos. Get the dog in the playground, absolute chaos. So all the kids got very, very excited and we went and we had a look out. I looked out onto the playground, no sign of a dog. Didn't think too much of it really. I thought, well, maybe a dog would come in, run out again. But then, a few days later, happened again. I was teaching, dog barking, rushed out onto the playground, no sign of a dog. Very peculiar. And then some very strange things happened. I was in my classroom a few days later again, but just me. I was on my own in the classroom and I was marking some work. And I could hear a sort of a whimpering noise. And again, it sounded like a dog. So I peered out onto the playground. No sign of a dog. So I went back to my marking, and then I could hear a sort of a knocking noise, like that. And it seemed to be coming from the roof. It seemed to be coming from above my ceiling. Oh, that was a bit weird. I thought, that's a bit strange. Something up there. What is it? Rats? Is it mice? What's something up there? Surely it can't be a dog up there. I mean, it's very weird. But it happened 2 or 3 times. That wasn't the first time that it happened. I mean, that was the first time it happened, but it happened several times. Very scary. Anyway, the whole school was moving. We were all moving to join the main school. So we were year 7s and 8s. And I was moving to the main school where we had a much bigger workshop. Okay, and that was what was going to happen. They were just closing the school down. It was in Ashford in Kent. Some of you might know. It was called Ashford North Boys. It was called. It was an all boys school. Anyway, it was closing down, and everything was being moved to the big main school, and that's what happened. So we just about moved everything and everything was going okay. And I got hold of the caretaker and I said to the caretaker, look, can we go up into the loft? Because there've been all these strange noises up there and I just would like to take a look. And the caretaker was a nice chap called Bill. And he got a ladder. There wasn't actually a ladder in my storeroom. I made that up in the story. Got a big ladder. We put it up. I said, you go first. I said, you go first. No, I didn't say that. I didn't say I was scared. I just said, oh, you go first. And he went up and he crawled up into the attic. And there was silence for a bit. And then he said, come and look at this. You won't believe it. And I climbed up the ladder into the attic space, into the loft space. And there, across the joists, was the skeleton of a dog. The skeleton of a dog. It must have been there, I don't know, 50 years, 100 years since the school was built. But it was the skeleton of a dog. It was not a real dog that had been making the noise. It had obviously been dead for years and years and years and years. And, remember that noise? In its mouth was a stick. Well, that's how I came to write The Howen. We kept the skeleton, we moved it to the big school, and the biology department had it, kept it, they sort of put it all back together again. But there you are. Scary, scary story. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed those 2 stories and my poems. I'm going to leave you now with two more quick poems about Halloween. And down below there somewhere, my giant hand, is a little kind of hat. You can make a donation, if you like, which will go to the Spooky Story and Poems Writers Fund, and that will be very welcome. So thank you if you'd like to make a little donation down there. That would be good. Well, I hope you've had a good time. I hope you watched this. Here are the last two poems about Halloween. The first one's not scary, so don't worry about the first one. It goes like this. Darren's got a pumpkin, hollowed out a treat. He put it in the window. He scared half the street. I wish I had a pumpkin, but I've not, and it's a shame. I've got a scary carrot, but it's not the same. Okay. This is a scary poem, and I've told this at several schools when I visited schools, and it's usually the last poem that I tell, and usually it's for year 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, maybe all in the big assembly together. And the little year 3s, they get up and they leave first, don't they, from the front. And I told this the first time I ever told this poem. All the little year 3s got up and wandered out, and where they'd been sitting on the floor, little damp patches. It's a very, very scary story, very scary poem. Here we go. But you'll be fine, so don't worry. It's called Trick or Treat. You'll be fine, you'll be fine. Here we go. As we lurch along the darkened street, this spooky Halloween, Freddy is dressed as Frankenstein, and his face is a sickly green. And Darren is dressed as the mummy, and he's bandaged from head to feet. And Sarah is a scary ghost wrapped up in a sheet. And I am dressed as Dracula in my robes of red and black. But I wish I knew who the zombie was, creeping along at the back. Oh, well, there we go. Hope you enjoyed the poems. Hope you enjoyed the stories. Sleep safely. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
People, wherever you are, thank you for listening to that last storyteller. What an amazing performance. And if you enjoyed it, the hat, look just below the story. If you're on the website, and I do encourage you to go to the website, and you can put a little in the hat. If you're in Texas, I've got a Texas hat here. I've got this in Kerrville. You could drop $1 in, or $2. If you're in England, you can drop £1 in, or more. If you're in Canada, well, you could drop a few dollars in. And maybe if you're right up north, in Lapland, you could drop a few kroner in, or maybe €1 or 2. It will be much appreciated. Thank you. Don't forget the hat and enjoy the stories.